They congratulated him at the expo. What they didn't know was whose work they were really praising. I watched from the coffee station as Marcus shook hands with another potential client, his smile wide and confident. The banner behind him read, "Transform your life with certified trainer Marcus Holloway." Every program listed, every transformation promise, every nutritional breakthrough, I had created all of it. 3 years of my research, my client relationships, my late nights perfecting macro calculations and progressive overload protocols. He was selling it all under his name, and until 20 minutes ago, no one knew the truth. It started small, the way most betrayals do. We met at a CrossFit gym in Portland, where I was coaching and he was training for amateur bodybuilding competitions. Marcus had charm, the kind that made you feel like the only person in the room. When he said he admired my coaching style, my dedication to evidence-based programming, I believed he meant it as a compliment, not a business plan. We married 8 months later in a small ceremony at his parents' vineyard. I thought I'd found my partner, someone who understood the passion I had for transforming lives through fitness. I was 26 and building something real. My client roster had grown from 5 to 32 in just 18 months. These weren't just people paying for workout plans. They were individuals I'd spent hours with, understanding their injuries, their metabolic responses, their psychological barriers to consistency. There was Diane, a 53-year-old teacher who'd lost 80 pounds following my phased approach to strength training and flexible dieting. There was Tommy, a former college athlete who'd rebuilt his relationship with exercise after I designed a program around his shoulder injury. Each client represented months of program adjustments, nutrition tweaks, and accountability conversations. I documented everything in detailed spreadsheets, progress photos taken in consistent lighting, testimonial videos where clients explained not just their physical changes, but how the mental approach I taught them had shifted their entire perspective on health. Marcus worked in pharmaceutical sales at the time, traveling 3 days a week to medical offices across the Pacific Northwest. His income was steady, reliable, nearly triple what I made from coaching. He'd talk about his job with a kind of detached professionalism, like it was something he did for money, but not purpose. Then, one evening, about 14 months into our marriage, he came home with an idea. He wanted to get his personal training certification, maybe transition into fitness coaching part-time, see if it could eventually replace the sales job he found so draining. I was excited for him. I gave him access to all my study materials, the textbooks I'd annotated during my own certification process, the practice exams I'd saved. I even let him observe my client sessions so he could see how I structured assessments and built rapport. He passed his certification exam 3 months later. I took him to dinner to celebrate, a Thai place we loved in the Pearl District, and he told me he was grateful for my support, that watching me work had shown him what passionate coaching looked like. The first time I saw my own program under his name, I thought it was a mistake. I was scrolling Instagram during a rare afternoon off when I saw his post. The image showed a 12-week transformation, a client named Victoria who'd lost 34 pounds and gained visible muscle definition. I recognized the program structure immediately because I'd created it for a client named Sharon the previous year. The same rep schemes, the same periodization blocks, the same carb cycling approach I'd developed after researching how different macronutrient timing affected recovery in women over 40. Marcus had even used similar language in the caption, talking about sustainable fat loss and muscle preservation. When I asked him about it that evening, he laughed it off. He said he'd used my program as inspiration, that all good coaches borrow ideas from each other, that I should be flattered. He said Victoria specifically requested a program like the ones I created, so he'd adapted mine to her needs. It felt wrong, but I convinced myself I was being territorial. Coaches do share methodologies. Maybe I was overreacting. Then I found the folder on our shared laptop. I'd opened it looking for a recipe document I'd saved, and there it was, labeled MT Coaching Materials. Inside were 47 of my client programs renamed with his clients' names, my detailed nutrition protocols rebranded with his logo, my exercise video demonstrations uploaded to his private YouTube channel, my client intake questionnaire word for word with his business name at the top. There were even consultation notes I'd written about specific client needs, metabolic adaptation strategies I'd researched for months, all organized in subfolders like he'd created them himself. I felt my hands go cold as I scrolled through file after file. These weren't inspirations or adaptations, these were my exact systems, my intellectual property, my 3 years of work building a coaching methodology that actually got results. That night, I confronted him directly. I told him I'd found the folder, that what he was doing was theft, that these programs represented years of my professional development. Marcus didn't deny it. He got defensive instead, his voice rising in a way I'd never heard before. He said I was being dramatic, that fitness programs weren't copyrightable, that everyone in the industry copied each other. He said he'd helped me build my business by supporting me financially while I worked long hours for little pay, so technically he'd invested in the creation of these programs too. He said if I really loved him, I'd want him to succeed, and that my programs were the fastest way for him to build credibility with clients. Then he said something that made my stomach turn. He told me I should be happy because his certification gave us more legitimacy as a coaching couple, that we could eventually market ourselves together, that my possessiveness over some spreadsheets and PDFs was going to damage our marriage. I didn't say anything else that night. I went to the guest room and lay awake until morning, staring at the ceiling and trying to understand how the man I'd married could justify stealing my work and then blame me for objecting. Over the next 6 months, I watched Marcus's coaching business explode. He'd post transformation photos that looked eerily similar to the results my clients achieved because they were following the same programming principles I'd spent years refining. He started charging premium rates, $200 per month for personalized coaching, using my client success stories as proof of his methodology's effectiveness. He got invited to speak at a local fitness summit about sustainable body recomposition, and I listened from our living room as he presented concepts I'd taught him, frameworks I'd developed, research I'd compiled. The audience applauded. Fitness bloggers shared his presentation slides. 3 gyms reached out asking if he'd do workshops for their members. He quit his pharmaceutical job 8 months after getting certified. His coaching roster grew to 53 clients. He started talking about opening a training facility, maybe franchising his method eventually. Every success he celebrated was built on my foundation, and every time I tried to discuss it, he'd shut me down with the same arguments. Community property, industry standard, supportive spouse. I stopped bringing it up because the conversations went nowhere except into circles of gaslighting and accusation. But I didn't stop documenting. Every time Marcus posted a transformation photo, I cross-referenced it with my own client files and saved both versions in a separate folder he didn't know existed. I had time-stamped Google Drive files showing when I'd created each program, some dating back 3 years before Marcus even got certified. I had email chains with clients where I'd explained my programming philosophy, detailed messages about why I chose specific exercise progressions or nutritional approaches. I had early drafts of programs with my handwritten notes in the margins, photos of my original whiteboards where I'd mapped out periodization blocks. I had testimonial videos where clients thanked me by name, mentioning specific techniques I'd taught them that I could prove Marcus had never used before accessing my files. Most importantly, I had the evolution documentation. My programs weren't static templates. They'd evolved over 3 years as I learned from client responses, adjusted for common plateaus, refined my approaches based on emerging research. I had every version saved, every iteration documented with notes about why I'd made specific changes. Marcus's programs showed no such evolution. They appeared fully formed in his client files because he'd simply copied my final versions.
I researched what I needed to do. The National Council for Certified Personal Trainers had a clear ethics code. Section 4.3 specifically prohibited misrepresentation of credentials, experience, or methodologies. Section 4.7 addressed intellectual property and required trainers to give proper attribution when using another professional's programming frameworks. Section 6.2 covered grounds for credential suspension pending investigation. Complaints required documented evidence and a formal written statement. I spent 2 weeks preparing my submission, organizing files chronologically, creating a comparison document that showed Marcus's programs alongside my originals with creation dates visible.
I included testimonials from 3 of my long-term clients who confirmed they'd worked with me years before Marcus was even certified, and could verify the programs he was now selling matched what I'd created for them. I attached email evidence showing Marcus had accessed my files from our shared laptop. I wrote a 4-page statement explaining the timeline, the theft, the gaslighting, and the ethical violations. I submitted everything through the NCCPT's confidential complaint portal on a Tuesday morning. The investigation took 6 weeks. During that time, Marcus was preparing for the Pacific Northwest Fitness Expo, the biggest industry event in our region. He'd paid $1,500 for an exhibitor booth where he planned to promote his coaching services, sell his program packages, and network with gym owners and supplement companies. He'd ordered custom banners showing his best client transformations, printed 500 business cards, and prepared a presentation about his training philosophy for the Expo's education seminar track. He talked about the Expo constantly, about how this was his breakthrough moment, how he'd finally get the industry recognition he deserved. He didn't notice I'd stopped engaging in these conversations. He didn't notice I'd moved my most important client files to a separate cloud account. He didn't notice I'd consulted with a lawyer about divorce proceedings. The Expo opened on a Friday morning in early October at the Convention Center downtown. Marcus left the house at 6 a.m. to set up his booth, his car packed with promotional materials and sample program guides. I didn't go with him, even though he'd assumed I would. I told him I had client sessions scheduled, which was true. What I didn't tell him was that I'd received an email from the NCCPT 3 days earlier. The subject line read, "Investigation Update, Case Number 47293. The message informed me that their review board had found substantial evidence supporting my complaint and would be issuing a formal notice of credential suspension pending a full ethics hearing. The notice would be delivered to Marcus electronically and by certified mail. They'd coordinated the delivery timing. Marcus would receive it at 10:15 a.m. on Friday, October 13th, approximately 2 hours after the Expo doors opened. I finished my morning client session and drove to the convention center. I paid for general admission and walked through the expo hall, past rows of supplement company booths and fitness equipment displays and athletic apparel vendors. Marcus's booth was in the middle section, positioned between a meal prep service and a functional training equipment company. His banner looked professional, showing 3 dramatic before and after transformations under the headline, "Evidence-Based Coaching That Transforms Lives, Marcus Holloway, NCCPT." He was talking to a couple who looked interested in his 12-week transformation package, gesturing enthusiastically at his program overview sheets. I bought coffee from a vendor stand about 40 feet away where I could see his booth, but he wouldn't notice me in the crowd. At 10:17, I watched Marcus check his phone. His expression shifted from confident to confused. He stepped away from the couple he'd been talking to and read something on his screen, his face going pale. He read it again, then looked around the expo hall like he was trying to find someone. He called a number, held the phone to his ear, waited. No answer. He checked his email, scrolled frantically, then opened what I knew was the formal notification letter. His hands were shaking. The couple he'd been helping walked away to another booth. A gym owner who'd been waiting to talk to him approached, but Marcus waved him off, still staring at his phone. I watched him frantically pack his materials, pulling down his banner with shaking hands, shoving brochures into boxes. Other exhibitors noticed. A few approached asking if everything was okay. Marcus didn't answer them. He just kept packing, his movements jerky and desperate. The booth space he'd paid $1,500 for was empty within 12 minutes. Nothing left but the table and share rental and a few scattered business cards on the floor. He dragged his boxes toward the exit, struggling with the banner that wouldn't fold properly, his face red and his jaw clenched. I stayed at the coffee station and watched him disappear through the convention center doors. I didn't go home that night. I stayed with my friend Rachel, another fitness coach who'd suspected something was off about Marcus's rapid success. I told her everything over wine in her kitchen, showed her the documentation I'd compiled, explained the investigation timeline. She listened without interrupting, then said something I needed to hear. She told me that protecting my work wasn't being possessive or unsupportive, it was being professional, and that what Marcus had done wasn't borrowing or adapting, it was theft. The next morning, I met with the divorce attorney I'd consulted the previous month. By Monday, Marcus had been served with both the divorce petition and a cease and desist letter regarding the use of my intellectual property. His social media went dark. His coaching website disappeared. The ethics hearing was scheduled for November, but he didn't contest the findings. The suspension became permanent. His coaching business dissolved. 3 of his clients reached out to me asking if I was accepting new people, saying they'd heard about what happened and wanted to work with the person who'd actually created the programs they'd been following. I rebuilt my business under my own name, with my own branding and my own voice. Within 8 months, my client roster grew to 74 people. I started creating educational content about evidence-based coaching, built a small online community of coaches who valued integrity and attribution, and launched a mentorship program for new trainers. I spoke at the following year's Pacific Northwest Fitness Expo, this time not about transformation protocols, but about intellectual property ethics in the fitness industry. The room was packed. Several attendees mentioned they remembered the incident with Marcus Holloway, how the story had circulated through industry circles as a cautionary tale about cutting corners and stealing credit. I didn't mention him by name during my presentation. I didn't need to. The work spoke for itself, and this time everyone knew whose work it actually was. I finally slept well at night, not because I'd destroyed him, but because I'd reclaimed what was mine and built something sustainable on my own terms. The programs were mine, the methodology was mine, the success was mine, and no one could take that away again.
You've just stepped into her revenge side, where every wound finds its justice, and every silence ends with truth. If her story struck a chord, make sure to like, share, and subscribe. Your support keeps these stories alive. Another secret waits in the next video. See how her revenge begins.